To symbolize the inauguration of PIERS 2023 by the traditional lighting of the oil lamp, may I call upon the Deputy Vice Chancellor of University of Peradeniya, Professor W.M.T. Madhujit, to represent the delegates from Transilvania University of Brasov, Romania, Professor Tibero Foris, the keynote speaker, former Deputy Governor of Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena, Head of Department of Economics and Statistics, Professor J.G. Sriranjit, Chair of PIERS 2023, Professor O.G. Dayaratnabanda, Coordinator of PIERS 2023, Dr. S.S.K.B.M. Dorabavila, Director of PGIHS, Professor Suresh Dimel, the Librarian of the University of Peradeniya, Mr. R. Eswaran, and representatives from the Bank of Ceylon and People's Bank. And also, please we welcome Professor and also we invite Professor Ravi Kurupuke, Dean of Faculty of Management, to the lighting of oil lamp. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Now I request the following dignitaries to the head table. The Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya, Professor W.M.T. Madhujit, representing the Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya, Chair of PIERS 2023, Professor O.G. Dayaratnabanda, the keynote speaker for PIERS 2023, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena, the guest speaker from the Transilvania University of Brasov, Professor Kudruta Adina Balchesko, Head of the Department of Economics and Statistics, University of Peradeniya, Professor J.G. Sriranjit, the Coordinator of PIERS 2023, Dr. S.S.K.B.M. Dorambavila, and the Director of the PGIHS, Professor Suresh Dimel. Thank you, and please rise for the University Anthem.
you, everyone. Please be seated. Now, I cordially invite the Chair of PIERS 2023, Professor O.G. Dayaratnabanda, for the welcome address.
Good morning to all of you. Sorry. I'm extremely delighted and pleased to stand here to welcome you all to the 9th Peradeniya International Economics Research Symposium that was started in 2013. And we have now completed 10th year of this conference. It is a remarkable success. And we are actually, in a way, celebrating and having this conference at a time when the country has flung into a most catastrophic economic crisis in the history of Sri Lanka, possibly after the 3rd century BC, the famine known as the Baminitheas famine. This is the most catastrophic crisis that we are experiencing after more than 2000 years. And we have been talking about this crisis for even before the crisis for about 3-4 years now. And after the crisis, and we have been doing postmortems, we have been having discussions about the way forward, and still the discussion and debate is not completed, and we are still having innovative ideas, thoughts about this. I would like to respectfully welcome the Acting Vice Chancellor, Professor Terence Madhujit, for gracing this occasion amidst his busy work. And your presence here is an honor to all of us, sir. And also, Dr. W. Vijayawardena, one of our friends, a colleague for a long time. He has been working with us, advising us in various things, for coming all the way from Colombo to actually deliver today's keynote address. And you will actually realize at the end of his speech that he is the most suitable person in the Sri Lankan academia to speak about the way forward from the crisis, with his experience in the central bank and also teaching experience in the Sri Lankan universities as well as abroad, and also at participating in various consultations, advising capacities, and also preparing various policies, policy documents. And I hope he is not fed up with actually trying to make Sri Lanka prosper. Welcome you, sir, to this very important international event. I would also like to welcome Professor Baltescu and the team from the Transilvania University, Brasov, Romania, one of the most beautiful universities, Romania. I once went there about 4 years ago. Welcome to Sri Lanka and welcome to University of Peradeniya, and we are pleased to have you with us today to have a great academic interaction here. And also the Mr. Asela Disanayaka, senior economist from the World Bank, is attending virtually. I would like to welcome him also. And also all the guests and invitees, including librarian, Mr. Maheswaran. We have Dean of the Faculty of Management, Professor Ravi Kurupuge. And also we have all the other distinguished invitees and guests here coming all the way to attend this important event for all of us. And also I would like to welcome the other members, Professor Suresh Dimel, and also the members of the Department of Economics, including the head of the department of this important event, for actually organizing this and also helping to coordinate this entire event. And at the beginning, I would like to actually reiterate that this conference is organized, fortunately, with the support of the Transilvania University, World Bank, and People's Bank of Sri Lanka, and Bank of Ceylon, Sri Lanka. And we have not been putting any burden to the taxpayers' money in this year to organize this conference, which is actually has to be mentioned at the beginning of this conference. Thank you to all of you. There will be a vote of thanks, but I would like to thank to Transilvania University, our colleagues, and also World Bank and Bank of Ceylon and People's Bank for actually collaborating with us to actually have this important event. And I don't want to take much time, but let me give take a few minutes to talk about where we are and where we are headed. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Sri Lanka is experienced the most catastrophic economic crisis that we have experienced in the history of Sri Lanka. After possibly 3rd century BC, Prometheus famine that we experienced. So now the good part of this entire crisis is that you can see the smile of the Sri Lankan people still. And you won't see the amount of impact, consequence, and the seriousness of the crisis when you see the people. But when you look at the numbers, you would see this is one of the most catastrophic economic crisis if you compare it with any crisis in the world. So therefore, as we will hear later, this crisis, I have been saying this is a man-made crisis. As we all know, economic crisis or recessions or depressions happen due to natural reasons that happen in the economies, as we all know. Business cycles happen due to technological slowdowns or various other reasons that are actually naturally there in the systems. So, but this crisis is mainly policy driven, I would say, policy missteps, policy driven, and not only 1 or 2 years, but decades of policy missteps. And also, we have been taking a wrong path for decades, not correcting the economic principles, not addressing economic principles in a pragmatic manner, and also ideology-driven policy making. In Sri Lanka, we see always policies are driven by ideologies rather than practical evidence. So unless you move on to evidence-driven policy making, solve problems and choosing the answers available, best answers, rather than trying to solve problems by saying who said what. So in Sri Lanka, we have been trying to solve the economic problems based on what that person said, what this person said, what this economist said, what that economist said, or what Marx said, what Lenin said, or what. So that I think is the disaster, because ideologies or theoretical things help us to understand things, but when you practice solve problems in the real world, they have pragmatic issues and we need to actually solve them. And now, today actually we will be talking about economic revival, and Dr. Vijayawardena is the right person to talk about it. I hope he will deliver a remarkable address to you, setting out where we are and how can we actually march towards the achievement of the prosperity of Sri Lanka. And as I said, yes, we are now, as various numbers say, the poverty has increased, inequality has increased, malnutrition has increased, regional inequalities have increased, unemployment actually has increased. There are various issues related to the serious economic issues have been actually an outcome of the current crisis. As I said at the beginning, I believe in the Sri Lankan people. You need to see that Sri Lankan people are remarkably resilient of people. We have been undergoing 500 years of colonialism in Sri Lanka from 1505 to 1948, close to 500 years. But still the basic character and the rigor with which people are able to overcome these crises have never actually disappeared from the Sri Lankan people. So therefore, with that actually we can hope that people will find ways and means to overcome this crisis, even if there is no government. I have always been saying that we have to act as if there is no government, because having a government may be better or worse, but people will realize that they will have to solve their problems and grow and face this crisis. So with that note, I think since there are other speeches, I would like to welcome you all, ladies and gentlemen, honorable distinguished guests, invitees to this 9th International Conference, Economic Conference, Research Conference of the University of Peradeniya. And I hope you all will have a great time ahead today, and we will be able to have meaningful discussions and learn new ideas, because I believe that we are in a middle income trap. Sri Lanka is in a middle income trap. The only way to get out of that is actually if you convert into knowledge-based solutions and also innovation-driven economic system. So for that, actually, I hope this conference will help us to actually shape the economic policy of Sri Lanka for the coming years. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Now, for the opening remarks, may I call upon the head of the Department of Economics and Statistics, Professor J.G. Sri Ranjit.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. Today, our chief guest and the guest of honor, Professor Terence Madhujit, Acting Vice Chancellor, University of Peradeniya, and also Deputy Vice Chancellor, University of Peradeniya. And our guest of honors, Professor Koduta Adina Balscu from Transilvania University of Brasov, Romania, and Mr. Asela Disanayaka, Acting Country Manager, Senior Economics, World Bank. And our keynote speaker today, Dr. W. Vijayawardena, is the former Deputy Governor of Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and also is adjunct professor at the Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand. And the Dean, Faculty of Management, Professor Ravi Kurupuge, and the Director, PGIHS, Heads of Department, and also our most valued invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, and dear students. Today, I'm honored to be here as the head of the department to declare the ceremonially opening of PIERS 2023 under the theme of Economic Crisis in Sri Lanka, Causes, Consequences, and the Way Forward. I think as Professor O.G. Dayaratnabanda mentioned correctly, so this is the topic of the day, I suppose, right? Because this is a kind of a historical crisis, economic crisis that we are having. In fact, now we feel the pain of that, right? Having a lot of macroeconomic instabilities, unemployment, heavy taxes, and the public debt, which is somewhere around 128% of GDP, and also kind of other things like poverty, income inequalities, and so on. So as economists, our role is actually to do research and then see the kind of the severity and also what are the ways of finding the way out of this crisis. Therefore, I think you all will find that this conference will be a fruitful and innovative place to interact, to discussions, and so on. And this year, the conference is jointly organized by the Department of Economics and Statistics, Faculty of Arts, University of Peradeniya, and Faculty of Economic Sciences and Business Administration, Transilvania University of Brasov, Romania. And our supportive partner is the World Bank. So I'm grateful to both these collaborative and supportive partners for giving their fullest support and also sharing their expertise to make this event a success. And this year, we are opening the 9th PIERS conference. We started this conference in 2013. Actually, one of our senior staff member, Professor Vijay Chandran, the concept came from his as his idea at the beginning, and then the head of the department at that time supported it. Of course, the main objective of that conference was at the beginning to give a platform for our students and also staff to present their research findings. And at that time onward, we continuously held that conference up to 2020. Of course, after that, we unexpectedly, unfortunately, had COVID-19 pandemic, followed by economic hardships and financial crisis and so on. Then we were not able to have this conference in 2021 and 2022. In fact, if we had continued it, the last year would have been the 10th year of 2023. But of course, we have already decided to celebrate it in the next year, 2024, at a magnificent level. I'm happy to say that Professor Vijay Chandran has already mentioned that he's happy to take over the leadership of that. And also several staff members mentioned that, okay, we are ready to have that event in the next year, 2024, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of PIERS. And also the conference, after inception, we found that it's a kind of a very useful and meaningful and also informative session. So we open it up for other partners as well, and institutions, research scholars, and so on. So I should mention that, of course, University of Brasov, Transilvania University of Brasov, Romania, and also Lahore University in Pakistan, and South Asian University in India, and World Bank. So they all supported in the previous or past conferences very much. And also there are many local supporters like banks and other institutions supported us very much. So at this time, I extend my sincere appreciation, gratitudes for them all to make this a kind of a very popular event and useful event up to now. And we expect their support even in the next year and future periods to make it a platform for a wider community to present their research findings and interactive sessions regarding our economic development aspects. So we hope that the next year to expand this event and invite even the private institutions. Now this year also we have split participants. I'm really happy about it. And then we should not limit these kind of events to the national university only, right? So actually at the beginning of the conference and after that few years, we were limited to the national university only, but we realized that national university or private university, it is not a matter as far as the quality of the research is good, and then we all accept them. So we'll all come together, right? And then we can open this platform to discuss and have intellectual dialogues regarding these economic issues and so on. Okay, so with that very short brief note, so I will conclude my opening remarks. I wish you all a fruitful and informative conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now, may I invite the Director of PGIHS of University of Peradeniya, Professor Suresh Dimel, to address the audience.
Good morning. Acting Vice Chancellor, our keynote speaker, Dean, Faculty of Management, Head of Economics Department and other heads, the Chair of the PIERS and Coordinator and other colleagues from the Economics Department, our guest of honor and academic colleagues from Transilvania, and also our fellow sponsors who are, I think some of whom who are joining online, including World Bank, other colleagues from the arts faculty and elsewhere, and particularly the presenters, because in a way this is your day, the presenters who are here. So even though I am here as the director of the Postgraduate Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences, my origins are in economics. Okay, so for those of you who are not from Peradeniya, I am from the economics department. And so in a sense, my roots are very much in economics. And I'm here right now for 3 years as the director. And so I'm representing the institute at this point. For those of you who are not here from Peradeniya, I understand there's quite a large delegation from SLIIT. So welcome to those of you from elsewhere. I'd just like to give a short introduction about PGIHS. So the Postgraduate Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences is actually the postgraduate arm of the University of Peradeniya when it comes to degrees in social sciences and humanities. And we cover the entire range of arts and humanities that is part of the arts faculty. These same degrees were offered previously under the Faculty of Arts, but after the setting up of the PGIHS, they were all moved over to the institute. And so we have postgraduate diploma programs, master's programs, master's with research programs, MPhils, and PhDs in 20 different disciplines, covering the entire range of social sciences and humanities. Because Peradeniya is actually, the Faculty of Arts is actually the widest when it comes to the range of fields that we have to offer within arts and humanities, social sciences and humanities, sorry. We know that there's lots of debate these days as to how relevant all of these, studying these subjects are, that there should be a focus on more science and technology and all of that, those kinds of fields of education. I, for myself, coming from a science background and then having moved to economics later on in life, understand that actually these disciplines are actually as important or maybe even more important than some of the more technical disciplines. And I think those of us who are in the disciplines know that because you're ultimately dealing with humanity and with society. And we are not just dealing with technical solutions. And so we need to have studies in these disciplines as well. And that's what PGIHS has to offer. In addition to the disciplines, we also have about 8 different degree programs that are interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary in nature within the social sciences and humanities, and also extending beyond. So that's just my introduction to PGIHS. We have over 3,000 students on roll at any point in time. We have about 1,000 students who join programs every year. And so it's a fairly large postgraduate program that we have at PGIHS. And we are glad to be a partner with the economics department in terms of offering our facilities for the PIERS. So I think we've already talked a little bit about the crisis and all of that. So I think we know where we are. We know how we got here. Some people also, I mean, you read the papers and we also have various people who are always flagged as who should be blamed for this crisis and so on. So there's a lot of these discussions taking place. But as we try to make our way out of this crisis, I think there's lots of things that need to happen. And I don't know whether our friends from Romania, as they walked around in Colombo and traveled around in Sri Lanka, you probably never realized that you're in a country that's going through a crisis, because on the surface of it, there's nothing much to be seen. But there's a lot going on underneath. And the fact of the matter is we are carrying on our lives at somewhat of an artificial level. We've just only started paying back our debts. And so there's a fairly long path out of this crisis that we have to dig ourselves out of. And so I hope that this day, as we look at the causes, consequences, and the way forward out of the crisis, that the discussions that you have today will throw out
That's one of the, now as foreigners, you might have seen the news coming up on global news that Sri Lanka is people are dying of hunger and all this, which is not true. You will really evidence what is happening in the country. Although we have been severely affected, but nobody died of hunger. I'm pretty sure that did not happen. So we have some Sri Lanka has been not very unfortunate, I would say, although has been quite unfortunate, but some level of blessings, unseen blessing is there. So that really protects the country. And people are pointing fingers at various parties as those who are responsible for plunging the country into this crisis. In my mind, when you are pointing the finger at one, 4 fingers are pointing towards us. So as academics, as highly respected economists in this country, and some of the economists are also in the parliament, and some of the economists are working for the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Whether we have directed the governments in the right path is also questionable. When we see the debates of economists on popular TV channels, economists also come up with various different models. Well, I am a layman to this subject, but as a layman, I see one economist is proposing one model, another economist is proposing a diagonally different model. Perhaps both models will bring the Sri Lanka to prosperity, but as laymen, we are a little bit perplexed as to how in these two pathways can bring the economy to a prosperity. That is also a question. And although we are pointing fingers at the politicians, we have to question ourselves whether the academics, whether the economists, whether the government officers have done their best to bring this country up. That also we should question. So I think in this regard, over the last few years, last 3 years, the poverty has definitely gone up. More than 3.5 million new additions to the poverty, bringing the poverty level to about 31%. So the poverty line, I was talking to Professor Dayaratna just a while ago. It's, I think, $91 US dollars. US dollars, $91 is the poverty line. So translated to Sri Lankan rupees, about 670 rupees a day. So those who are earning less than that is called poor. But with 700 rupees, what can you do? Is a question. So in this regard, the organizing this kind of a forum to debate, to discuss, to deliberate the economic crisis of the country. The economic crisis is well known, but what are the real causes? Have we identified the real cause of the problem? Obviously, we know that COVID is not the real problem. COVID, yes, it affected because we lost lots of man hours, man days, and the export-oriented industries were severely affected, labor shortages, and exorbitant amount of money what had to be spent on healthcare. All these are understandable. But the problem, the root cause is going beyond. The mismanagement, lack of governance, mishandling money, so many things, and inefficiencies in the country. Now we are producing, this year we have absorbed 41,000 to about more than 41,000 students as graduates to state universities. Now it's a huge expenditure on the country. And at the end of the 3rd year or 4th year, a fraction goes to the railway fourth station and asking for jobs. So what is the entrepreneurship that we are inculcating in them? So nearly 345,000 students at A levels last year, of which 41,000 ended up at universities. So the rest were left behind. And these 41,000 should be able to provide employment opportunities for others. And at least a small fraction I can understand. Most of them might be external graduate, but still they are asking for jobs. And internal graduates too. Rather than going with private sector, corporate sector and starting their own businesses, they have preference to go with government jobs, either to become a teacher. Well, teaching profession is very well respectable. That's understandable, but everybody should not be a teacher. Then they want to stay as development officers and AGS officers, where they have nothing to do. Inefficiencies. In Sri Lankan bus, Sri Lanka Transport Board, to take care of one bus, there are nearly 12 employees working. And thousands of workers are working at petrol gas stations, fueling stations. Can we afford to continue with these inefficiencies? So these are the things that we should think about. Earlier, we thought we are scientists, we are doctors, we are engineers, but during the last almost 3 years, we know that doctors, scientists, engineers cannot do much without economists. So finally, everything will be translated into rupees, dollars, euros, and cents. So therefore, economists, unless they give the real directions to the country, all these doctors, scientists will finally fail. So that highlights the importance of economists. I am talking to a forum of economists today. So I see on the back of the invitation card that you have a very nice thematic areas. I'm sure many presenters are here. Health and nutrition and economics, the fiscal policy, the debt structure, so many. So therefore, without much ado, thank you very much, the team from Transilvania University of Brasov, for arriving in Sri Lanka and also funding this, at least partial funding, so that you are very welcome to University of Peradeniya and to the most beautiful country in this region. And also our partners, BOC and People's Bank, for taking the financial burden onto their shoulders, and the Department of Economics headed by Professor Sri Ranjit, even in this hardest hit time, organizing this PIERS for the 9th consecutive time. That shows your resilience. Thank you very much. And all the others, although the Dean of the faculty is not here, the guidance provided by him and the Vice Chancellor, who is away from the country, for his guidance. I wish a very productive sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now, to address the audience, I invite the guest speaker of PIERS 2023, Professor Codruta Adina Bacescu from Transilvania University of Brasov, Romania.
Good morning. Dear members of the academic community, dear guests and dear colleagues and friends, I speak from all my colleagues. We are very, very honored and very happy to be invited here as coordinators of the 9th edition of the PIERS conference. First of all, please allow me to present my my colleagues. Professor Korish, he is the head of our delegation. He's also the head of the Department of Management and Informatic Management. His fields of specializations are entrepreneurship and human resource management. Professor Alina Tecău, she is from the Department of Marketing, Tourism Services and International Business. All the ladies are from this department. She is, her field of specializations are consumer behavior and marketing research. Eliza Nikifor is the youngest member of our delegation. She is specialized in digital marketing, and she is the best of the future of our university. And myself, my name is Codruța Băltescu. My field of, my domain of specialization is tourism. And I also am a PhD coordinator in tourism marketing. On behalf of Director of Transilvania University of Brasov, Professor Ioan Vasilea Brudan, and the Dean of the Faculty of Economic Sciences and Business Administration, Professor Gabriel Brătucu, I address you sincere congratulations and our thanks for being there together in organizing this conference as colleagues and friends. This is a message from our dean, and I present some of these elements. We were interrupted by the unfortunate events generated by the pandemic crisis. And after the pandemic crisis, all crises followed according to the dictionary economic, which is financial, energy, food, culminating with the war in Europe, one of the last continents in the peace zone. So we have a lot of topics to talk about and study about all these crises and the ways in which we have learned to overcome them. I would like to tell you a few of my opinions about economic crisis in tourism, which is my my domain of research and teaching activities. Internationally, pandemic generated a huge crisis in tourism. Making a comparison with or using a term from an international sport, well-known sport, which is boxing. Tourism was defeated by knockout and was badly injured after the pandemic. But 2023 seems a very good year, a recovering year. The data which are presented by the United Nations World Tourism Organization highlight the fact that in 2023, in the first quarter of the 2023, international arrivals and receipts are about 80% from the previous pandemic best year, which was 2019. From this pandemic, there are several winners, I may say. First of all, there is the domestic tourism. To give you some examples, in 2021, Italy, which is one of the most famous international destinations, had more tourists than ever before, because 90% of their all tourists were Italians who decided to travel within their country. Romania is another example. We rely mostly after pandemic on our domestic tourism. Our governors tried to enforce to develop this domestic tourism, offering employees from the public institutions. They are called in Romania travel vouchers. we have about 30 euros every year to be spent in accommodation services and similar services offered only by Romanian enterprises. There is another winner. It is not because the pandemic, but it came up after the pandemic, and I mean the countries from the Middle East. They have now in 2023 more tourists than ever before, because in my personal opinion, the investments they made and the promotion they made are all paying off. And the third winner is the digital channel of communicating. There were previous also noticeable, but the pandemic accelerated this marketing, so this digital communicating process. So we communicate, we promote, we sell, we advertise, we do everything by using this digital means and techniques. Also, United Nations World Tourism Organizations highlighted some trends for tourism starting from 2023, and there is a first one is the long haul distances for travel. So we prefer, well, internationally speaking, travelers prefer to seek long haul destinations. And another trend is seeking the authenticity, beautiful landscapes, genuine culture, all that is specific to a certain nation. So, in my opinion, these trends are assets for the Sri Lanka tourism entrepreneurship. In my opinion, the Sri Lanka tourism will be, as I've seen so many beautiful cities and wonderful landscape and the kindest people ever I have met. I'm sure that Sri Lanka entrepreneurship will outcome this crisis and will find solutions on short, medium, and long-term long term. In the end of my speech, I would like to quote an Arabian wise saying that good times create weak people, and strong time and difficult times create strong people. And a Romanian wise is saying that what is not killing us makes us more strengthened. Thank you. Thank you again. And vivat Academia, vivat profesores. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for your mesmerizing speech. Next, I have the honor of inviting the next guest speaker, Acting Country Manager of the World Bank, Mr. Asela Disanayake, to address the audience. He joins us virtually from his office at the World Bank at Colombo.
Thank you. I hope you can see me and hear me clearly. Sorry, I believe my video has stopped working. Just give us a second. No camera. I get a message. Sorry, I get a message saying that the host has not set the video. But what I'll do is then I'll go ahead and speak. So, Chief Guest, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor W.M.T. Madhujit, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, distinguished audience, academics, and students. On behalf of the World Bank, I'm pleased to join the Peradeniya International Economic Research Symposium, PIERS 2023, as a supporting partner today, and share some remarks with you on Sri Lanka's economic crisis, while outlining how the World Bank is supporting the country navigate towards a green, resilient, and inclusive recovery. Little more than 1 year ago, we saw the peak of Sri Lanka's worst economic crisis in its post-independence history. While COVID-19 played a role, we also observed that poor governance, a restrictive trade regime, a weak investment climate, and episodes of loose monetary policy, as well as an administered exchange rate, contributed to macroeconomic imbalances in the last 2 decades. I see the video is on. As a result, the economy on the poor and vulnerable, and jeopardizing Sri Lanka's past development gains. We estimate that poverty doubled from 13.1 to 25% between 2021 and 2022, an addition of 2.5 million poor people, and we expect this to increase further in 2023. This dramatic increase in poverty and vulnerability has wiped out decades-long human capital gains. However, there has been some signs of stability in the past few months compared to 2022. Inflation is moderating from its peak of 69.8% in September 2022 and was at 6.3% in July 2023. Market interest rates are also declining as the uncertainty over domestic debt restructuring reduces and inflation is decelerating from a high base. And the foreign exchange liquidity has also improved. While recent macroeconomic performance has been slightly better than expected, downside risks over the medium term continue to be very high, given a likely narrow path to recovery and low fiscal and external buffers. Indeed, the path to recovery is tedious and long, and we cannot emphasize enough on how essential it is for Sri Lanka to stay the course. When the crisis hit, the World Bank moved early and quickly, and this is by repurposing existing resources to ensure continuity in critical functions such as delivery in health, education, and social protection, as well as ensuring continued supplies of fertilizer for farmers and cooking gas for families and small businesses. This provided some critical breathing space for Sri Lankans in the darkest hours of the crisis. Last year, the World Bank undertook a process called reverse graduation to enable Sri Lanka to be eligible for concessional financing from the International Development Association. Sri Lanka had graduated from IDA in 2017, but the reverse graduation enabled us to provide an initial $700 million in new IDA financing, including a budget support operation. This will focus on improving economic governance, enhancing growth and competitiveness, and protecting the poor and vulnerable. And 2 projects aimed at supporting social and financial sector safety nets. Additionally, there are other investment financing and budget support operations in the pipeline to support the country. The World Bank Group has a new country partnership framework, or CPF, for Sri Lanka for the next 4 years. This lays out a 2-phased approach that starts with a focus on urgent macro fiscal and structural reforms and support to protect human capital and the most vulnerable population. After the first 18 to 24 months of the CPF and subject to successful implementation of the reform program and international debt relief and financial support, the CPF's focus will gradually shift to investments in longer-term development needs that will help promote private sector job creation, particularly for women and youth, and boost resilience to climate and external shocks while continuing to invest in social protection and human capital. We are hopeful that an uninterrupted socio-political climate can help achieve these objectives. In this light, we would like to recall our successful consultation with the academics of the University of Peradeniya in socializing the World Bank Group's CPF only a few months ago in May, when our team visited the Faculty of Arts in Kandy. The academic consultation was part of a large program where diverse groups of external stakeholders engaged with us and provided views on the CPF. And we take this opportunity to appreciate your recommendations, which will undoubtedly further enhance our program in Sri Lanka. Presently, Sri Lanka is facing multiple crises, including health, food, water, energy, and climate. It is at such a juncture that we must also navigate through a severe economic shock, and therefore, it is imperative that the government maintains the reform program that received support through a 48-month extended fund facility of approximately $3 billion. Given that the future is already promising to be one that is outlined by a number of novel calamities, avoiding a prolonged economic crisis would provide a significant sense of respite. On Sri Lanka's road to economic recovery, we believe that there are several critical areas that would positively shape the way forward. And these include shifting to a more productive and outward-looking economy, transforming economic governance to prevent another crisis, addressing competitiveness constraints and governance issues posed by state-owned enterprises, continue to strengthen the country's social protection system to improve coverage and enhanced protection of the poor and vulnerable, including from future shocks, and prioritizing investments in human capital. In achieving this end, meaningful outcomes of debt restructuring and the collective support of local and international partners alike will be imperative and needed. The crisis provides a unique opportunity to implement deep and permanent structural reforms that may be difficult in normal circumstances. But we are now in a race against time. Sri Lanka cannot face another crisis of this nature and must make the best of this opportunity to build a strong economy that can withstand future shocks. We encourage you as academics, professionals, researchers, and students, but most importantly, as citizens, to support these critical reforms and to hold decision makers accountable to deliver on these reforms so that Sri Lanka comes out of this crisis faster and stronger. In the past, Sri Lanka has experienced significant reform reversals, and I urge us all, including development partners, to work together to ensure that the country stays the course on difficult reforms. On behalf of the World Bank, I thank the Department of Economics and Statistics of the University of Peradeniya for inviting me for PIERS 2023, and wish all those who are set to present at the technical sessions a successful afternoon. I hope that the outcomes of these sessions will contribute towards helping Sri Lanka build back better. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to the next item in the agenda, let us have a look at the highlights of PIERS since its inception in 2013. Chief Editor of PIERS 2023, Dr. T. Vinayagadasan. Thank you, everyone. And now, to introduce the keynote speaker for PIERS 2023, may I hand over the floor to the Chair Professor of Department of Economics and Statistics, University of Peradeniya, Professor Dilani Gunawardena.
Distinguished members of the head table, distinguished invitees, colleagues, students, and friends. I'm extremely pleased to be able to introduce our keynote speaker today. And before I start, I just want to say something to Professor Terence Madhuthit, Acting Vice Chancellor. Sir, I'm sure that Dr. Vijayawardena has 10 fingers like the rest of us. But of all of us here, I think he's the person that can rest assured that when he was pointing fingers, there may have been fingers pointing back towards him, but really he has maybe the least of all of us to consider in that respect. And let me, through his bio, show you what I mean. Dr. Vijayawardena is at present President of the Business Management School, BMS, a government-approved non-state sector university in Sri Lanka. He has held this position since 2010. We best know him in his previous capacity as a central bank economist, a position he occupied for nearly 40 years before retiring from the bank in 2009 as deputy governor. Let me pause here to speculate that had Dr. Vijayawardena not left the bank in 2009, and had he stayed and gone on to hold the highest position of that institution, the trajectory of Sri Lanka's economic fortunes might have been quite different. But unfortunately, that is the road that was not taken. His biography reveals several contributions he has made while he was at the central bank, which may not be that well known to this audience, and I will take the time to mention them, especially as they are examples of institutional building. From 2000 to 2008, when he was the chairman of Sri Lanka Accounting and Auditing Standards Monitoring Board, he initiated the setting up of Sri Lanka's auditing and accounting standards. As the chairman of the Institute of Bankers of Sri Lanka during 2000 to 2009, he led the team that successfully negotiated with the Chartered Institute of Bankers UK for the accreditation of its qualification. He led the team that established the Credit Information Bureau of Sri Lanka as its founding general manager in 1990. He also steered the central bank modernization project, which introduced modern technology to the bank while creating a lean and efficient organization. The The technological innovations introduced to the bank consisted of the establishment of a modern payment system called the real-time gross settlement, automation of the general ledger of the bank, and modernization of public debt management by setting up the central depository to record scriptless government securities. Dr. Wijewardena also still plays an active teaching role. He is an adjunct faculty at the Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand and is a visiting lecturer to the University of Sri Lanka and the Postgraduate Institute of Management. He also serves on the faculty study boards of both the Sabaragama University and the Postgraduate Institute of Management. He has served on the graduate faculty board of the University of Sri Lanka and on the council of the University of Colombo. Dr. Wijewardena has a first-class honors degree in public administration from the University of Sri Lanka, as well as a postgraduate diploma in applied social statistics from the same university. He has a Master of Science in Economics from the University of York, the Doctor of Business Administration from California Metropolitan University, and a further DBA in Banking and Finance from European International University, Paris. For the lifetime contribution he has made to economics and economic policy making, he has been awarded the Doctor of Civil Law, HC, by Northumbria University, UK. Dr. Wijewardena describes himself as a writer, a public speaker, an economic analyst, an educationist. I think we are all familiar with his weekly column on economic and related issues called My View, Economics Matters, which appears every Monday in the Daily FT. If I had to describe him in one sentence, in these days where such a thing is rare, I would say he is someone who is not afraid to speak truth to power. Dr. Wijewardena, over to you.
Thanks, Chair Professor Dileni Gunawardena, for the very generous and kind introduction. Professor Gunawardena and myself had been in association for, I think, for many years. So therefore, she is not a stranger to me, nor am I a stranger to her. Deputy Vice Chancellor and other dignitaries at the head table, visiting faculty from Transilvania University of Brasov in Romania, faculty, students, distinguished invitees, and ladies and gentlemen. It is always a pleasure, privilege, and honor to visit the University of Peradeniya. Even though I was not fortunate to study here, I have been tutored at the central bank by those governors and also the directors of economic research who had been produced by the University of Peradeniya. So therefore, I can very legitimately say that I am one of you. I am not a stranger here. In fact, the first director of economic research of the central bank, when it was started in 1950, was loaned to central bank by the University of Ceylon. Professor Dasgupta became the first director of economic research. At that time, there were two contenders, both of whom were professors here, Professor B.R. Shenoy and Professor Dasgupta, but central bank chose for Professor Dasgupta, and Professor B.R. Shenoy joined the Reserve Bank of India as an economic advisor. Since then, I think almost all the governors of the central bank, deputy governors of the central bank, directors of economic research of the central bank, and all other senior officers of the central bank had been produced by Peradeniya University. So therefore, you have a very close collaboration with the central bank, and I am therefore privileged to be present here at the 9th Symposium organized by the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences on the economic crisis which Sri Lanka is facing today. And the Deputy Vice Chancellor was very critical of economists for failing to provide correct advice to the policymakers. Had the economists had done their job properly, it implied that we could have averted the present crisis. But if you have watched the media over the last 3 to 4 year time period, I have done it. Every week I find an academic from University of Peradeniya appearing on TV, explaining to us why we have gone wrong, what should be done, and so forth. Unfortunately for Sri Lanka, their Vice Council had never been heard by the people to whom it might matter. So we are in a great difficulty today, not because of anything, because of this gap between the academics and policymakers. When some of the most disastrous economic policies were taken by the government, not only the previous government of Gotabaya Rajapaksa, but also the governments before that, it was the academics from Peradeniya University who came forward and who actually directed us in the correct path. But what happened was, we were not actually humble enough or sincere enough to listen to their voices. So that's why we are here. So the title of today's, I think the theme of today's symposium is the economic crisis in Sri Lanka, causes, consequences, and the way forward. And many of the academics who will address you will talk about the causes and consequences. I have therefore chosen for my keynote address the way forward. The way forward strategy mainly consists of, in the short to medium term, Sri Lanka would get a bailout package from the International Monetary Fund and stabilize its macroeconomy. But to resolve the chronic and acute economic crisis in the country, Sri Lanka is planning to become a rich country by year 2048. This has been announced by President Ranil Wickremesinghe when he addressed the nation, when he addressed parliamentarians, and also on many public fora he had addressed. The year 2048 has been chosen by Sri Lanka because that is the year in which Sri Lanka would celebrate the centenary of its independence from Britain. It's ironical that when the British left us, we were a relatively rich country. But after 100 years, now we are going to make Sri Lanka again a rich country. So it's an irony that we are facing. 2 weeks before President Ranil Wickremesinghe made this pronouncement, Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, also announced that his government will take action to make India a rich country by 2047, 1 year before Sri Lanka. Why 1 year before Sri Lanka? Because India got independence in 1947, Sri Lanka 1948. So it appears that both India and Sri Lanka are walking along the same line. India first and Sri Lanka following, which is not a bad thing, because when there is somebody who sets an example for us to follow, I don't think there's nothing wrong in Sri Lanka to do so. But let us hope India will become a rich country by 1947, and Sri Lanka also will become a rich country by 2048. So this is the target of Sri Lanka today, because the main reason is, even though the worst of the economic crisis is no longer here, we are still not out of the woods. We are still in the crisis. The crisis is not over yet. And all of a sudden, something might trigger off to push us back to where we were in the middle of 2022. So in order to avoid that, Ranil Wickremesinghe government wants to first stabilize the macroeconomy by getting funding from the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, ADB, and all the friendly nations, India, Japan, China, UK, USA, Australia. You mention it, and they are there to support us. And they would provide temporary emergency relief to Sri Lanka so that Sri Lanka can overcome the present economic crisis involving the foreign exchange crisis, the monetary crisis, and the fiscal sector crisis. And you will hear from various experts on these areas, the nature of these crises and how the crisis occurred and so forth. I will just take you through some of the challenges that we might face in our march towards 2048 target. Because 2048 is the year in which we'll become a rich country. And unfortunately for us, the President Ranil Wickremesinghe never disclosed the detailed strategy that his government would be following to make us a rich country in 2048. Instead, what he said was, while addressing the nation, he said that he's going to assemble the leaders in the private sector, bureaucracy, and the cabinet in a lab, in a policy lab, to be convened by him towards the end of the second quarter, which is now over. And those guinea pigs in the policy lab are supposed to come out with a policy strategy which Sri Lanka should follow during the next 25 years or so to make Sri Lanka a rich country. And that particular report is to be out according to his timeline by the end of this quarter, by end of September. But since the policy lab has not been convened, I think it might take a little longer to get this report. Just to provide some advice to those who are to be assembled there, he had pronounced two particular announcements. One is that he said he is following what is known as the social market economy ideology during his time period. Now, this is not new to Sri Lanka, because when he became the Prime Minister in 2015 also, he pronounced that his government would follow the ideology of social market economy, but it was never implemented. I can recall I was invited to University of Peradeniya immediately after he made the pronouncement. I delivered a long speech on social market economy as well as the implications involving that. Social market economy is an economic policy ideology adopted by the post-war Germany, which we call the West Germany at that time, to avoid the following of both the extreme capitalism and extreme socialism. Because the Germans had already faced the intricacies of following all these political ideologies, and as you are well aware, the German was subject to hyperinflation immediately after the First World War. The inflation rate running over 1,000,000% per annum, and therefore they didn't want to follow either the extreme capitalism or extreme socialism. Instead, they followed the middle path. So what is meant by the social market economy is you believe in the role of the private sector. The private sector is still the engine of growth, but the government also has a role to play. So that role is simply to direct the economy in the correct path by taking into account the vulnerable groups which would become at disadvantage as a result of following the type of capitalist economic policies. Germany was successful in adopting this particular ideology and coming out of the destruction of the Second World War within a matter of about 5 to 6 years. And today it is one of the leading global economies. Unfortunately for Sri Lanka, even though we pronounced in 2015 that we would be following it, there was no any attempt at describing or explaining what it is. Because I can recall, because I am lecturing at the Postgraduate Institute of Management, there was a seminar attended by the ministry secretaries and the additional secretaries, where I had to introduce this particular social market economy philosophy to them. I asked the question, did they read anything about the social market economy? Except one, none of them had read it. Even the person who had read it, because he had anticipated that it could be a probable question in the efficiency by examination, therefore he had studied. None of them. So the failure of the first Ranil Wickremesinghe government in implementing the social market economy ideology was that it was just in the heads of the policymakers. It had not been dispersed or communicated to the people to whom it matters, the bureaucrats, the politicians, the members of his own party, the general public, and so forth. We are actually facing the same threat this time also. Social market economy as the policy ideology of the new government has been pronounced, but the parliamentarians who are supporting President Ranil Wickremesinghe in parliament, they believe in something else. The way that they speak, the way that they criticize the present government's policies, you will find that they are in the opposite, completely in the opposite camp. Even the more opposite than the opposition members. So it has not been communicated to them well. But if we look at the type of policies which President Ranil Wickremesinghe has pronounced so far, I find that they are not different from the neoliberal economic policies which had been prescribed to us by the trio in Washington, the World Bank, the IMF, and the US Treasury, and we are simply following them. Now, in fact, whatever the policy measures being advocated by the International Monetary Fund are based on this neoliberal economic policy. So we are presenting to the members of the public that we are following the social market economy policy. But at the same time, we are following a completely opposite policy package involving what is now known as the neoliberal economic policies, and many of the academics have already contested the validity of the neoliberal economic policies as policy guideline for a country to come out of a crisis. Then President Ranil Wickremesinghe has said that in his government, there are four basic pillars that would actually guide the government in the future. Pillar number one was that he wanted to discipline the government budget. The disciplining means we have already gone out of control in the government budget. The expenditures have ballooned while the revenues have actually lagged behind the expenditures. Huge budget deficit. So disciplining the budget means that we have to cut the expenditure and also we have to increase the revenue. But unfortunately for us, the current policy package being followed by us on the recommendation of the International Monetary Fund is based on what is known as the revenue-based fiscal consolidation. So what is meant by this revenue-based fiscal consolidation is that we try to resolve the fiscal crisis by increasing the revenue of the government rather than trying to curtail the expenditure side of the government. Now, this is very visible in the budget of 2023. When the budget of 2023 was announced, presented by President Ranil Wickremesinghe in Parliament, the country's revenue was targeted to be increased from around 2 trillion rupees to 3.4 trillion rupees, a massive increase. And subsequently, when Sri Lanka went for the International Monetary Fund's bailout package, the IMF had scaled down the revenue target to 3.2 trillion Sri Lanka rupees. So from 3.4 to 3.2. So we were concerned only about the increase in the revenues. That is why we have this big problem with the university academic, because we have been taxed very high. They are in the street. Most of them are leaving the country, because we are only concerned about the revenue target and not the expenditure target. The expenditure target is not known to us as ordinary citizens, because what is presented to us in the budget is called the net position of the budget. Now, what is being read in Parliament is the net position. What is being debated by government, by the parliamentarians, is the net position of the budget. What is being approved by the parliamentary is the net position. But the gross position is something else. The gross position is hidden. Immediately after the approval of the main budget, there is another approval being made by the parliamentarians in Sri Lanka called the approval of the Appropriation Act. Appropriation Act is similar to, and if those who have done accounting would know, to the cash flow of the government, cash inflow and the cash outflow. So in the cash outflow, how we convert the gross expenditure of the government to the net expenditure is that whenever there is a maturity of any public debt during that particular time period, it is always assumed that the government is in a position to reissue it and refinance it. So therefore, that is taken out. So the budget deficit presented to us by the central bank in its annual report, by the Ministry of Finance in its annual report, and the budget deficit that we discuss in the universities is this net position. But what matters to the government is not the net position, but the gross position, the total expenditure of the government, which is actually passed in a hurry by parliamentarians immediately after they pass the main budget in Parliament. There you have the gross expenditure. Now, the gross expenditure of Sri Lanka government for 2020, now net expenditure is some 8.4 trillion rupees. Gross expenditure is 14 trillion rupees. Taking into account the public debt that would mature during the year and the interest that has to be paid on that particular public debt during the year. Now, if you look at the revenue performance of the government so far during the first 6 months, we are supposed to generate at least 1.6 trillion during the first 6 months. But all the three revenue generation agencies, the Inland Revenue, Customs, and the Excise Department, have so far been able to generate only about 70% of that. So in the second half, we have to get 1.6 trillion plus what has been missing during the first half. So my estimate is that most probably Sri Lanka would end up year 2023 with the revenue mobilization of some 2.8 trillion, not the 3 So this is the massive challenge which President Ranil Wickremesinghe would face in the next 6 months' time. Though disciplining the budget is one of the pillars, unless we cut down the government expenditure drastically and repurpose that expenditure as the World Bank has done, as Mr. Asela Disanayak had explained to us, we are not in a position to discipline the budget. Budget is completely out of our control today. The second one is the promotion of investments. Investment promotion is necessary because Sri Lanka, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, Sri Lanka had not got that much of foreign direct investment to the country because of the various structural problems that we are facing. Domestic investments also didn't come forward because of the tax treatments that we had, anomalous tax treatment that we had adopted during the period. So what is happening is that those who have done economics will know, for us to generate an economic growth of 7% per annum based on the current efficient use of the capital in the country, we need to have an investment of about 35%. But the maximum investment that we got was about 26%. There was a massive savings investment gap. And that gap was financed by borrowing from the rest of the world, specifically from the commercial markets. Now the present problem is a different type. One is that we can no longer rely on the type of investment that we had made in the past. Because what is necessary for Sri Lanka to come out of the present economic crisis is to change the entire structure of Sri Lanka's export sector and the structure of Sri Lanka's economy. We had been concentrating on the tea, rubber and coconuts, the tree sector, apparel sector, and some of the minor agricultural crops as exports. And all these are now, we have come to the saturated point. We cannot move any further to expand the Sri Lanka's economy through these three sectors. So we have to go for new ones. So new ones involves today the conversion of Sri Lanka's economy by using modern technology so that you would be able to produce to the rest of the world the high-tech products. So far, if you look at our merchandise exports, our high-tech products are about, say, 1% of our total export revenue. But if you want to become a country worth by year 2048, or even to realize the targets of the fourth industrial revolution, which is now undergoing with the world, we must have at least 40% of our exports in the form of high-tech product. So the new investment should be those areas. I will look at the details of the consequences and the implications and so challenges of changing to that. Third pillar is the providing social security to people who are not in a position to gain the maximum benefit out of the current economic policy reforms. For that purpose, we have already changed from the Samurdhi scheme to assessment scheme. And still, since the money has not been allocated by the Treasury to make the payments, and Treasury cannot do that because Treasury doesn't have any money. So they have lots of problems in the social security provision there. The fourth pillar that he had suggested to the people in the lab is the reform of the state-owned enterprises. So those are the four pillars. Now, people who are to be assembled into this lab, policy lab, will have to discuss critically the purpose of the social market economy, the four pillars which the government is following, and then come out is a policy strategy to take us to richness by 2048. And the policy lab is also not something that has come out of the blue sky. It is coming from the growth lab of the Center for International Development of the Harvard University in USA. There are the Professor Ricardo Hausman, who came to Sri Lanka also several times. He's the head of the policy lab there, growth lab there. They are the people who provide the technical assistance to countries who want to follow this. Naturally, President Ranil Wickremesinghe has great faith in the CID, not the Criminal Investigation Department, the Center for International Development of the Harvard University, because he is one of the alumni of the CID. So therefore, he has a great faith in that. I hope that the people who are to be assembled in the policy lab, probably towards the next 1 to 2 months time period, would be guided by the economists coming from the growth lab of the Harvard University. There's nothing wrong in that. I hope that it will provide the necessary technical know-how to us. But what matters to us is there are certain implications that we have to take into account. Now, for us to gain additional or accelerate economic growth, all of you who have done growth economics will know we are using physical capital, human capital, and technology in a combination to accelerate economic growth. Now, physical capital is not being produced by Sri Lanka. We have to get it from outside. The countries like Romania will have to help us to get the physical capital. Human capital, even though we think that we had been successful in producing human capital in this country, we have not been able to produce the required type of human capital today. Even Deputy Vice Chancellor referred to the fact that we are providing degrees to graduates, and those graduates, immediately after they get the degree, they stand at the Lifton circles and they demand a government job. That is because we have just developed human capital, but not the creative capital. What is needed? The creative capital. So creative capital is the development of the human intellect in such a way that that intellect would be able to break the boundaries that are being set for us by the prevailing social, cultural, economic, and political constraints. We must be able to challenge everything. And those graduates who are able to do that, they would be able to become creative once they become graduates. Then we have two issues now. One issue is that our population is aging. Now, presently, the average medium age of a Sri Lankan is some 34 years compared to 27 years in India. We are aging. Then our population will start falling. So by 2048, as a result, the projected median age of a Sri Lankan is some 45 years, very old people. So we are going to take Sri Lanka to economic prosperity, richness, with these old people like me. Whereas the young people are leaving the country. Why young people are leaving the country, that's a different issue. But in my view, there's nothing wrong in their leaving the country, because those people who leave the country today, and if we are successful in getting them, which is called the migration of the professionals. The university professors are leaving in large numbers because according to University Grant Commission chairman who testified before the COP, Committee on Public Enterprise in Parliament, he said during the last 3-year period, some 1,000 university grant lecturers have left the university system, according to him. Large number. Similar number, about say 200 people have left the central bank, another 200 Bank of Ceylon, about 800 doctors from the healthcare system. People are leaving. But there's nothing wrong in leaving them as long as we are in a position to generate what is known as the reverse migration. Let them leave today. After they leave Sri Lanka today, let them gain experience, let them accumulate capital, let them make market networks, which we call the social capital, and return to Sri Lanka and take us towards this richness by year 2048. This is exactly what is being done in Vietnam today, because you may remember in 1970s, the Vietnamese people left that country in boats. They were known as the boat people, boat refugees. They settled themselves in Australia and New Zealand, but they are now returning to Vietnam with capital, experience, entrepreneurship, and the market networks, connections. So that's why Vietnam has been more successful than Sri Lanka, even though Vietnam started its growth journey many years after us. Same thing is happening in India also. Now, Indian software engineers were employed in UK, Israel, Ireland, USA, Canada, Australia, Germany, France. They are returning in large numbers, and they have created what is now known as the Silicon Valley in Bangalore. And India has become, now remember, India started using computers many years after Sri Lanka. Immediately after Sri Lankan economy was opened in 1977, we had access to computers. In fact, we had played the game much more efficiently and much more effectively than India. Because when I went to India in 1978, they had not seen a credit card, and they were astonished to see my using a credit card, but they had not seen it. But today, we have to learn from them how we should, digitize our identity cards. That's how the things have happened. That is because the people who had left that country earlier, they had returned. So therefore, don't take the people who are leaving the country as a curse. I have seen, even my good friend, chairman of the University Grant Commission, says we must, tax them. Before they leave, we will have to collect the money that the government has spent on them as free education. Again, another myth. That is because the myth has been, I think, spread by many people who have an interest in this particular subject, that the students in Sri Lanka are being paid by the taxpayers without bothering to define who are the taxpayers. That is because they think the taxpayers are the people who pay direct taxes or indirect taxes. In other words, if you take the government budget, the money that I refer to, 3.2 trillion being raised by the government for 2023, many think that those are the taxpayers. No. 200 years before, early 19th century, English economist David Ricardo, he actually resolved this problem forever for us. He said, there's no difference between the tax burden and the debt burden. What it means is that, you have a government expenditure, you finance it by raising taxes. So there's a burden. Immediately, there's a burden falling on you. Then the government can finance itself by borrowing from the market by issuing bonds, the treasury bonds or treasury bills, as in the case of Sri Lanka. David Ricardo very correctly pointed out the treasury bonds and bills the government issues today are actually future tax obligations. The people in the future will have to pay taxes. So therefore, we have two types of taxpayers now. The taxpayers who are paying taxes today and the taxpayers who are paying taxes tomorrow. Then there's a third category which was not there during the time of David Ricardo, that's the printing of money by the government through the central bank. Now, this was brought into our analysis by Robert Barrow of Harvard University. Therefore, it is now called the Ricardian-Barrow equivalence, the new theory. He said that when the government prints money by using the central bank, we actually impose an inflation tax on people. So there are types of taxpayers that we have is that we have the current taxpayers, the future taxpayers, and the inflation taxpayers. Who are the inflation taxpayers? All of us who are present here. Now, for example, I have calculated because the Colombo Consumer Price Index now, day before yesterday, I think the Census Department released the latest data saying that the inflation rate has come down from 6% to 4%. So we were very happy. Actually, central banks should be happy, not the consumers like us. This particular time series was released by the Census Department with 100 as the index value in January 2021. End of August, the index value has gone up to 190. Now, my pension, if I look at it from that point of view, has fallen from January 2021 to the 100 rupee pension to some 52 rupees. So there is an inflation tax of 48 rupees I have paid. So similarly, all these, things will have to be taken into account, and therefore nobody can say that the students have got free education. The students have financed. Instead, you have to say students have financed themselves, their education, by paying current taxes, by paying future taxes, and by paying a tax called the inflation tax. So therefore, there's nothing wrong. And if someone is trying to collect the cost of the education from them at the airport, I think we'll have to teach him economics anew. That's the short and the long story that I had to see. So we have therefore this the demographic problem which is facing us very seriously. We have an aging population. We have a skillless population, which we call we have a population which is not creative. We have human capital, but we don't have creative human capital. So this is what the Ranil Wickremesinghe government will have to address now. We have the best universities in the country. 16 universities plus another new universities to be set up. So we'll have 17 universities very soon. And if you look at the academic credentials of the staff there, they have got their postgraduate degrees from the best universities in the world. Then we have the research institutions like the Industrial Technology Institute, ITI, Tea Research Institute, Rubber Research Institute, Coconut Research Institute, the Department of Agriculture. If you look at the credentials of the researchers there, they also have got the best, postgraduate degrees from the best universities in the world. So we have a total research output there. So what we should do is we have to assemble this research collection to produce creative capital for Sri Lanka, so that let the people who leave the country leave. In fact, they say that when somebody leaves, it is good for the person who remains back, because when most of my seniors left the central bank, actually it was good for me. I became the deputy governor. Otherwise, I wouldn't have become the deputy governor. So the remaining people will get a higher salary and they get a better opportunity. But what we should do is we'll have to train them into being this creative capital that would help Sri Lanka to take Sri Lanka to reach this by year 2040. Now, instead, what is being done is some piecemeal solution. Now, you would have heard President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who had come to Kandy last week, announcing to, I think, Mahamaya College, I think Dileni Gunawardana's, Mahamaya, they saying that he will give 10 million rupees to each college so that they can play in the share market. And after 5 years, those who are most successful in the game will be given a scholarship to go to Singapore and learn more about the share market. Now, share market is not the type of thing that we have to develop in Sri Lanka to convert our human capital to creative capital. Instead, we'll have to get the prevailing universities. And there again, we have missed the bus now. We set up 2 faculties of technology, one at the University of Sri Lanka, the other one at the University of Colombo. They were to set up their faculties at the tech city in Pitipana and Homagama. The objective was that most of the leading private sector companies will come and set up their businesses there, so that the 2 faculties will provide the necessary research and the inventive capacity to those private business so that they can commercialize those products. Unfortunately, what happened was only one of the companies that had promised to set up there, they have set up their factory, which is an associate of the Hemas group called the J.L. Morrison and Sons, the pharmaceutical company. They are also now thinking of moving out from that particular location because there is no roadway to reach Pitipana. I mean, if you go to Pitipana today, you will find the most hazardous road. Now, many think that coming from Colombo to Kandy is the most hazardous. But if you go from Homagama to Pitipana, you will find the most hazardous road that you will have. And the universities have to, engage buses, private buses to transport students because there's no private bus service there. So that particular model has now been completely ignored, mainly because the Gotabaya Rajapaksa government, by a one single stroke of pen, they scrapped the entire project. Tech City in Pitipana. Now I have recommended to Ranil Pramil, start it immediately. You have to start it immediately because that is how you will convert the existing human capital to creative capital so that we will be able to overcome the human resource problem that we are facing today, aging of the population and the lack of the required human skills to take us to richness. Then we have the investment problem here. In the case of investment, the most important thing for Sri Lanka, as I have already mentioned, we cannot rely anymore on tea, rubber, coconut and apparel sector. The apparel sector, we already have lost it because why apparel sector was located in countries like us was that, we had cheap labor there. And the labor cost in the countries where the markets are located, like US, the North America and Europe and Japan and Australia, they were very high. And therefore, they were located here. And that was the attraction for the companies to set up the apparel sector in Sri Lanka. And today, what is happening is because of these new advancements in technology, artificial intelligence, robot technology, then the machine learning, that particular disadvantage which those countries had is no more there. You can actually automate the garment production. So instead of, earlier location was called offshoring. Now what is happening is we are onshoring the same factories in USA, UK, Portugal, Romania, and all those countries. Because those countries are in a position, even though the labor charges are higher, they can automate the production of apparels there. So we are losing that market again because of the relocation. Second one is we are losing to countries like Myanmar, Cambodia, and Vietnam, whose labor, also Bangladesh, labor charges are lower, plus their labor is more efficient than the labor in Sri Lanka. Because some of the mistake that we make normally is that when we calculate the labor productivity, we look at the wages per day, per worker. That's not the proper one. We have to measure it, the output per day per worker. In Sri Lanka, wage per day per worker is low, about $100 per month. In China, the output per day per worker is 3 times the output of a Sri Lankan worker. So we are losing that market. So we have to necessarily now change our production model. And that requires us to introduce high technology to our production. High technology comes from the universities, the faculties of technology that we have set up. And these people will have to come up with the new high technology. And what happens is that instead of trying to produce one commodity in a country, we'll have to produce only one part of that commodity. Because today, the production model is known as the production sharing networks. We produce only one item. And that item is exported in large volume to another country which would assemble it. And then we are also part of that. For example, the iPhone 7, which is assembled in a factory in Foxconn in China, there are 47 countries that are supplying the components to iPhone 7. So it's a joint work by all these countries. In Sri Lanka also, instead of trying to, manufacture motor car, manufacture an aeroplane in Sri Lanka, what we should do is we have to produce one component, increase its volume, gain out of the volume increase, and send it to another country for assembling as a final product. There are already 2 such companies in Sri Lanka about which we can be proud of. I think you may be aware. One is called Lanka Harness, located at Biyagama. Lanka Harness, and you may be surprised to hear, is the company that supplies the sensors for airbags for all the automobiles in the world. Romania, all the countries in the world, we supply the sensors. China, Japan, India, Europe, USA, Canada, all the countries. One company. And it has become now a $400 export company today, which is a very high amount. And they are expanding. Second one is at Tulliria. We have Mass Fabrics. Mass Fabrics is producing the canvas for the Nike shoes and supplying it to a factory in Vietnam, which will assemble the Nike shoes and supply to Sri Lanka, Romania, India, all the other countries. So we have only 2. 2 is not enough. The economists say we should have a critical mass. So what is a critical mass? Critical mass is the number that is necessary to make a change. We should have the technology students in a critical mass. We should have a creative capital in a critical mass. So 2 companies are not sufficient. So what we have to do is we have to promote as many companies as possible, maybe as startup companies or even the prevailing existing companies, to concentrate on the production of one high-tech item and supply it to other countries and enjoy the benefits of what is known as this production sharing networks. And that is what we should do to make Sri Lanka rich country. I hope this message is loud enough for the people who are to be assembled in the growth lab to hear. Because I am writing about it in my weekly column, and therefore they must learn about it. Because rather than trying to produce one particular output in Sri Lanka. Now, for example, the Chandrayaan-3, which landed on the moon by India recently, and many thought that it's an Indian product. No, 80% has come from outside. Only 20% has been manufactured in India. 80% has come from outside. France, the high-tech countries like France, Germany, Japan, Australia, all those countries. So India is wise enough to do that. Let Sri Lanka also gain the same wisdom, because Sri Lanka is following India to gain this particular wisdom today. So what we must do is, our universities will have to concentrate on new inventions. What we mean by new inventions is a new product or new management system by engineers or scientists, and make it known to the market. And once it is known, the entrepreneurs will have to pick it up and commercially produce it and export to other countries. So the lab people will have to now look at 2 things. One is the universities will have to be given additional funding immediately to produce, to come up with new inventions. You must have a competition not among the schools where they play the game in the share market in the best way. You must have a competition in schools where they come up with new inventions, universities with new inventions. Let Peradeniya University compete with University of Sri Lanka and University of Colombo, which also have set up faculties for technology today. Let them compete and come up with inventions. But the inventions alone will not produce anything else unless it is commercially produced. This is not my word, because this is what was said by Joseph Schumpeter some 100 years ago. He said there are 4 significant requirements for a country to become a rich country. One is invention. Then the inventions will have to be commercially produced by entrepreneurs, which he called the innovation. Then that innovation should be, the knowledge should be spread among all the other manufacturers in the country, which he called the diffusion, then it should be imitated by other people. So there are 4 items. One is the invention. The universities can do the invention. Who will do the innovation? That's the entrepreneurs. So let us build the link today. The diffusion, the university can do the diffusion, and also the entrepreneurs also can do the diffusion. Then imitation. So let us have, I mean, this instead of giving this 10 million rupees to each school, let us give 10 million rupees to each school so that they will start a startup company and imitate whatever that has been produced by some other people. So this is a must if you want to become a rich country. It's not difficult. If we have the correct policies, I hope the Growth Lab will look into these things and come up with the proper strategies. And if they do so, we can become a rich country by 2048. But by 2048, I am not available here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It was indeed an honor to have you deliver this year's keynote speech. To present the token of appreciation to the keynote speaker, I invite the Chair of PIERS 2023, Professor O.G. Dayaratna Banda, and to assist him, I call upon Professor Dileni Gunawardana. Thank you. Next, to present the souvenir to Professor Kudruta Adina Balcersco from the Transilvania University of Brasov, Romania, I invite the I invite the head of the Department of the Economics and Statistics, Professor J.G. Shiranjit, and to assist him, may I call upon the coordinator of PIERS 2023, Dr. S.S.K.B.M. Dorambavila. Thank you. And we will be sending the next souvenir to the acting country manager of the World Bank, Mr. Asela Disanayaka, who is joining virtually. Thank you, everyone. As we come close to the end of the inauguration ceremony, to deliver the vote of thanks, may I call upon the coordinator of PIERS 2023, Dr. S.S.K.B.M. Dorambavila.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you, distinguished members of the head table, distinguished invitees, dear colleagues, presenters and authors, and my dear students. We have now come to the end of an inauguration session along with an intellectually stimulating and economically and socially inspiring talks that address the important economic challenges and the required new policy developments for Sri Lanka as a nation that is striving towards economic recovery and achieving the status of a rich country in the surrounding of the University of Peradeniya. I consider it a great privilege and honor to have been assigned the task of proposing the vote of thanks for the memorable event on behalf of this organizing committee for the 9th Peradeniya International Economic Symposium of the Department of Economics and Statistics that started in the year 2013. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to take this opportunity to extend my sincere thanks to the Vice Chancellor and the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya, and the Dean, Faculty of Arts, University of Peradeniya, Dean, Faculty of Economics and Sciences and Business Administration, Transilvania University of Brasov, Romania, for extending their fullest support and guidance to this event. I would like to take this opportunity to extend a sincere thanks to our chief guest, Professor Terence Majudit, Acting Vice Chancellor, for being here with us in your busy schedule. I know it is also important that most of us, or you will agree, that this event would not have been a success if not for Professor O.G. Dayaratna Banda, the chairperson of the PIERS 2023, Professor J.G. Sri Ranjit, Head Department of Economics and Statistics, University of Peradeniya, Chief Editor, Dr. T. Vinayagadasan, Co-Coordinator, Ms. Lakshika Veragoda, and members of the editorial and organizing committees, reviewers, chairpersons, discussants of this symposium. So I also would like to take this opportunity to thank the keynote speaker, Dr. W. Vijayawardena, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, for kindly accepting our invitation to deliver the keynote speech at the inauguration session today. I also take this opportunity to thank Professor Kodruta Bolstescu, Faculty of Economic Sciences and Business Administration, Transilvania University of Romania, Brasov, Romania, and also Mr. Asela Disanayaka, Acting Country Manager, Senior Economist, who agreed to join us virtually due to his inability to be in here physically at this moment, and for their valuable guest speeches at the inauguration session. I also would like to thank Professor Tribusi Forrest, the head of the Management and Economic Informatics Department, Faculty of Economic Sciences and Business Administration, Transilvania, Brasov, Romania, for kindly accepting our invitation to participate as a guest of honor at this symposium. I also think this opportunity to thank all the invited guests, the Transilvania University delegates from Romania, the deans of faculty, actually Dean of Faculty of Management, the librarian, the head of the departments, all other participants, and my dear students of the Department of Economics and Statistics for their participation at the conference. I feel it is my responsibility to recognize the continuous dedication of Ms. Nuanti Jaisinghe, Ms. Amasha Herat, and Ms. Angel, and other junior staff members of the Department of Economics and Statistics, and the volunteer students for helping this with the secretarial work to the successful completion of this event today. A sincere thanks goes to Mr. Eranga Jayaratna and other non-academic staff members of the Department of Economics and Statistics as well. And I extend my sincere thanks to the local and international authors and presenters, without whom this event would not have taken place. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to the joint partnership, supportive partnership, and sponsorships of the PIERS 2023, which mainly consist of Transilvania University of Brasov, Romania, World Bank, Postgraduate Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences, Bank of Ceylon, and People's Bank, respectively. I thank the University Bursar, the Assistant Registrar, and the Senior Assistant Bursar of the Faculty of Arts, and their staff for their cooperation extended to us. I also take this opportunity to thank the Director of the PGIHS, Professor Suresh Dimel, for giving his fullest support to this event by providing the symposium venue and all the other facilities, as well as his staff. I thank the curator and the staff of the Landscaping Division and the Public Relations Officer of the University of Peradeniya, and for their immense help with arrangement at the symposium premises and all non-academic staff of the Faculty of Arts for their support extended to make this event a success. I finally extend my sincere thanks to all who devoted their time to bring this 9th Peradeniya International Economic Research Symposium to a reality today. I wish all the participants a fruitful, productive technical sessions of 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the inauguration ceremony of PIERS 2023. Please enjoy the refreshments which have been arranged for you outside. The technical sessions will commence at 11:50 a.m. We kindly request you to be present at your technical session on time. Thank you. Have a pleasant afternoon.